Welcome to episode number 23 of the G5 Hive, where we aim to bring you all the honey in G5 college football. As always, I am your host, Justice, and I'm joined by my co-host, Luke. How you doing tonight, Luke?
I'm doing well. For whatever reason, this Monday did not feel like a Monday for me. Not sure why, but usually it's drags on a Monday. Didn't feel that way.
Has
Not
it
sure, but I love it.
it's warmed up for you?
Yes. Yep. Let's see here. Let's see if I can get what
You
is the temp.
You still got snow on the ground?
Oh yeah, still got the snow on the ground. It is a whopping 43 degrees right now.
It's a
Way
heat
better
wave
than the like
compared to last week.
negative. Yeah, it was like negative 15 at some point. So there's something about Midwest winter that when you um go into winter and it gets like 32 degrees, you have to wear a coat because it's cold. But then like when it's going into spring and it hits 32 degrees, it's like I can wear a sweatshirt. This ain't bad at all. Same temperature, but it's like two different outcomes. Today I walked into work with a sweatshirt. It was a little bitter, but it's like I can make do with it.
Yeah, it's actually I'm actually colder. It's 39 where I'm at, so that's but it's I'm a little behind you, so you'll probably catch me here in the next hour or so.
Yeah.
But so this week actually released today, I guess, right? Earlier today, as we mentioned on last week's episode, Luke and I, G5 Hive, were asked to participate in the way too early CFF mock draft by CFF Jared. And we did that, I guess it's been 2-3 weeks ago now. It was right in the beginning of January.
About 2.5 ish, I think.
And so anyway, we had to record. We did the draft, and then we did some recording, and all the participants sent it over to Jared last week, and then Jared kind of mashed it together and released the special episode earlier today. We both have had a chance to watch it. I'd encourage everyone to go check it out on the YouTube channel, the Chasing the Natty YouTube. It's also available in podcast form as well. I just prefer, the YouTube. You get to see all the wonderful graphics that Jared puts together. And it lasted 2 hours, and I didn't realize that until you said something about it. But when I was watching it today, I didn't realize it didn't feel like 2 hours to me. So it was just great content, and I would encourage everyone, if you have not checked it out yet, to head on over to the Chasing the Natty YouTube channel and check out that way too early mock draft special.
Yeah, I would definitely watch it in YouTube form. I've got little kids. I'm always on the go. I'm going. So I listen to it on podcast form. Definitely would suggest listening to this one on YouTube if you get the chance. Still great in podcast form, but having, I think, the teams there as they go through the questions. Also, I saw that it was 2 hours long. I was like, oh, I wonder what Jared added to it. And then it was just, all of us talking about our teams. I was like, wow, I can't believe that lasted 2 hours. Great content. Jared must have done great stuff with the editing, because I know we had some players that we talked about that had since moved teams that I know he definitely had to do some editing for us. So appreciate that, Jared. And that is probably something that was not easy to do with 12 people. So
yeah, if you watch it, you'll notice that we drafted PJ Hatter. That's not technically who we drafted. We drafted Jaden DeLora at Texas State, but that was before all the stuff kind of went down, and he ended up leaving the program. So we just swapped PJ Hatter in there, Texas State quarterback. So yeah, but great time, and thanks to Jared for giving us an invite. We greatly appreciate it, and hopefully we can some of the picks we made, like the Mario Anderson, will turn out and turn around and shine for Memphis this coming year. So last week we kicked off our transfer portal and coaching changes, conference by conference, with the American Athletic Conference. Tonight, we are going to move over to Conference USA. And the first team we're going to start with is the Florida International Golden Panthers. Any coaching changes we need to be aware of, Luke?
No major coaching changes here. All coaches will be going into their third year, so continuity, at least from a coaching standpoint. What do we got for players leaving and going?
So they definitely took some hits as far as who's leaving. Probably the biggest one is wide receiver Chris Mitchell, who is going over to Notre Dame. They also lost quarterback Grayson James, going to Boston College, and wide receiver Jalen Bracey is out of eligibility. They do bring in two receivers, one of them being Juju Lewis from Georgia Tech, and the other is DJ Washington for New Mexico. They return their quarterback. They return their starting quarterback, I guess I should say, with Keon Jenkins, and their running backs as well, with Shamari Lawrence and Kajan Owens also return their top two running backs. Like we said, Chris Mitchell's gone. That's probably their biggest loss. But their next two leading receivers, Dean Patterson and Eric Rivers, return. And on the offensive line, they return most, looks like all the starters except for one. So for the most part, other than losing Mitchell, not too big of a loss there, other than Mitchell. So someone's got to step in and replace his 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns of last year. Who that's going to be, it's kind of too early to tell. Dean Patterson was their second leading receiver with 28 catches for 423 yards, followed by Eric Rivers, 32 catches for 343 yards. They're both sophomores. And then, like I said, you got the transfers of DJ Washington and Juju Lewis. Maybe one of those guys steps up in Chris Mitchell's absence. Still remains to be seen.
Not something I'm interested in from a fantasy perspective. Here might be one of those guys that, depending on how many waiver pickups you get, that you might, do a bye-week fill-in type thing here or there, especially with, most of the offensive line coming back. Maybe running back,
Shamari
plug
Lawrence.
and play here and there. But yeah, I don't think there'll be much Florida International Panther fantasy goodness coming here. So
yeah, definitely not, and definitely not unless you're in a very shallow league. You're probably not targeting any Florida International guys this coming year, at least not at this point. Next up is a newcomer to the Conference USA last year, and they actually got to go to a bowl game last year because there weren't enough eligible teams, and that is the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. What do we got for coaching changes?
So out is their DC, Zach Alley. He is now the co-defensive coordinator at Oklahoma.
That's a big loss because their defense was really good last year.
Yes, it was, and gave them plenty of opportunities there on the offensive side. Especially run it. I want to say run and shoot. That's not like their offense, but it's like run. It's like go, go, go all the time.
Yes, very fast-paced offense.
In comes DC Luke Olson. First time I wrote this down out of habit. I don't know why, but I put Lute Olson. Great
old Arizona basketball coach.
I was like, I don't know what he's doing a DC here in Jacksonville State, but who am I to say? But yeah, Luke Olson. He was last a senior defensive analyst at TCU and was the DC at Tulsa in 2022. So it goes from DC to Tulsa, then over to TCU last year.
Tulsa had a decent defense in 2022. So hopefully he can get that going and keep the momentum for that defense at Jacksonville State. As far as players leaving, probably the two big ones, as we said, they're a fast-paced offense. They run the ball a lot, not a whole lot that you expect from the passing offense, but they lose quarterback Zion Webb, who is out of eligibility, who really came on strong towards the end of last year and was, definitely a starter, for college fantasy teams towards the end of the year once they kind of settled on him. And then running back Malik Jackson, who we talked about. He kind of fell off the end of the year because of injury, but for the first several, I don't know, half the season or so, he wasn't anything spectacular, but he was pretty steady, right? Getting you, probably 10 to 12 points a week. But Malik Jackson is out of eligibility. And the other guys they lose are receivers. They lose Perry Carter and Jamar Joyner, who are both out of eligibility. And then Sterling Galbin, receiver, going to Stephen F. Austin. Now, who's coming in? First, quarterback Zion Turner from Connecticut, which just kind of, to me, just messes up this quarterback room, right? With Logan Smothers and others there, so it doesn't really help give much clarity. They bring in wide receiver Brandon Spector from Clemson.
I kind of like that.
And yeah, I mean, I think he could be a decent receiver for them. And then Samaria Rudolph from UAB. They also bring in, from a fantasy perspective, the guys in this offense, it's the quarterback and probably would be number one. And then the running back, I'd say, they have Logan Smothers still there. Ashton Fry is there. Both of those guys played this past year. Fry is a bit more of a passer than he is a runner, whereas Smothers more of a runner than he is a passer. Zion Turner also kind of fits that mold, more of a runner than a passer. Zion Turner does have starting experience from his time at Connecticut. I expect it to kind of be a battle between Smothers and Turner. Smothers, I think a lot of people had high hopes for Smothers that, he came over from Nebraska from the P5. I think people had higher expectations for him. And he had moments where he played well last year, and then he had other moments where, he didn't play so well.
I think Smothers is going to, have the leg up,
yeah,
coming in with I think running an offense that quick, you've got to know the hand signals, audibles, like all those things. I think really play a part in it. I think that really gives him a leg up. We'll see how spring practice goes and whatnot, but it's hard. It's hard to mentally practice that stuff at that speed. So, if anything, I feel like he starts right away, and then if he has like a short leash, then maybe gets pulled and it's more on the job training.
And we saw last year, Rich Rod's not scared to throw different quarterbacks out there because he threw 3 different quarterbacks out there. So, it's something to kind of pay attention to. But I agree with you. Smothers should probably get the first crack at the starting gig. As far as running backs, you got Ron Wiggins and Anwar Lewis, both returning. Ron and they, from a production standpoint, they were, pretty spot on, close, identical to each other. Wiggins had 92 attempts for 468 yards, 6 touchdowns. Anwar Lewis had 93 attempts, 452 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Those are probably the 2 guys you're looking at, and they do spread the ball around. Now, Malik Jackson last year had 146 yards, 146 attempts, 897 yards, and 7 touchdowns. A lot of his damage was, like I said, was done earlier in the year when Wiggins and Lewis weren't necessarily healthy. So he kind of got, he shared only with Zion Webb, whereas Wiggins, Lewis are also going to share at the quarterback. So you may see something similar again where you see 3 guys with 600 yards apiece, and there might not be that one guy that stands out, but maybe Wiggins is going to be the guy that's going to get the goal line carry. So you take a shot on him if he's going to get that 600 yards and then potential double-digit touchdowns.
And then if Zion Turner gets playing time or gets that starting job, I think wide receivers are something that you got to look into. Like you said, being more of a passing quarterback is not much of the runner type. I think playing at that fast pace, you're bringing in a quarterback to throw the ball. Like, good idea to go get a wide receiver in a pass happy offense.
Perry Carter was their leading receiver last year. He had 70 targets. He caught 38 of those for 687 yards and 4 touchdowns. But he's gone, so they're gonna have to replace him. But they do return Sean Brown at tight end, who had 41 targets, caught 19 balls, 294 yards, 5 touchdowns. So,
That's not bad for a tight end.
if you're in a deep tight end league, Sean Brown's definitely someone to look at. And the offensive line looks like they lose 2 of their primary guys. So not too bad there. All right. Moving on to the new kids on the block, the Kennesaw State Owls. What do you want to tell us about the coaches there?
All right. So I had a lot of fun learning a little bit more about the Kennesaw State Owls. So, we've got some stuff to share with you. So, head coach Brian Bohannon, he's going into year 12. He's been with the team since the football team started there. He's 68-24 overall. So didn't really know what to expect. Digging deep into the coaches, OC, and offensive line coach, Chris, I'm going to Klinakis. I don't love seeing an OL next to the OC. Usually that's a quarterback coach or maybe on occasion wide receiver coach. But yeah, I was like, offensive line, okay, so do they run the ball? Oh, heck yeah, they do. But he is in year 2. His, I will say, claim to fame is he. It's funny. I would recommend going to the Kennesaw State team page and reading the bio, but pretty much says, Lamar would pretty much be nowhere without him. Lamar Jackson, he coached him at Louisville, and he coached Colin Kaepernick at Nevada, which of course would be nothing without him. This and this. So it was very funny how things were phrased, but yeah, had a couple solid running quarterbacks there, and he was the O-line coach at Liberty in 2022. So I believe, I'm trying to remember stats wise, but I think their quarterback was second on the team in rush attempts. Yeah. So definitely they run an option or a triple option. Their twist, not exactly what Army does, but they have a flavor of the same thing.
I watched one of their games today because I was trying to get a feel for like who can you compare them to, and I watched them play. I watched their game against Furman, which happened this past year. It was early in the season, and I would not say they play like Air Force, Army, or Navy. They throw the ball, or at least this is only a 1-game sample, so take that for what it's worth. But in that game, they threw the ball much more than the Army, Air Force, and Navy throws the ball. It didn't really look like they ran plays that look like plays that those other teams run, the triple option teams, but overall the offense didn't necessarily look like what you would think a triple option offense would look like. The quarterback was almost always in the shotgun. The running back was either behind him or lined up next to him, and it was a single back. And then they had 3 guys out wide. A lot of that time, that was one of those 3 guys out wide was a running back, and then they had a tight end in line. So it really looked more like I'd say a spread offense per se than
did they do like jet sweeps or anything like that?
They did. They ran the dive, running back dive, fullback dive. In this case, it's a running back because they only have a single running. Most plays, there's only a single running back in the backfield. They ran the running back dives. They ran jet sweeps. and on occasion the quarterback would run like a more true option where he's running with the ball and pitching it out to a guy on the outside. So yeah, there are plays like that, like you would see in those other offenses. But that game against Furman, they passed the ball a whole lot more than Air Force, Army, and Navy passed the ball.
And, unlike, I guess probably more like Army, probably don't want a piece of this offense for a fantasy football perspective.
No.
Not like Air Force where you want, a running back there. Probably more like the Army standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't good. They weren't. They were just. I mean, I don't know. They weren't anything exciting. They didn't do anything that said, "Hey, I want this guy." Yeah.
So Kennesaw State does have a little change. So out is defensive coordinator Nathan Burton. He is going to Troy to be their defensive coordinator. And in comes DC Greg Harris. He is previously the linebacker coach for the last 4 years. So he's been with that defense, but this will be year one as the DC. So defensive wise, he's got the culture, has been around, has got the attitude, everything that goes into what you want your defense to be, whatever, kind of ticks that they have, etc. I think they won't miss, much of a beat. Probably Greg Harris probably has an idea of, what Burton was doing. So probably stay the same there. What do we got for who's leaving, who's coming? What do we need to get to know for these Kennesaw State Owls?
As far as who's leaving, I'm just going to kind of go over these guys just to kind of give you guys some perspective about the numbers folks put up in this offense, because you're not going to be familiar with them. But their quarterback, Jonathan Murphy, the starting quarterback, he is gone. Last season, he had 1,190 yards passing, 8 passing touchdowns. He had 118 rushing attempts for 584 yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. As Luke alluded to earlier, he was their second leading rusher on the team. And then they also, as I mentioned, they have a running back out wide. Well, 2 running backs are their leading receivers, but they're not like out of the backfield. They're actually lined up out wide. But running back Isaac Foster, who from a rushing perspective only had 8 attempts for 54 yards, but he was their second leading receiver with 17 receptions, 210 yards, and a touchdown. Both of these guys are gone and moving on. They do have one guy coming in that I just wanted to mention. Again, they don't rush the ball well enough or pass the ball well enough that I would target any of these folks in a normal CFF draft. I mean, I got to imagine like the only time any of these guys are going to get drafted is maybe a Conference USA only league. But wide receiver Christian Moss is coming in. He's coming over from Virginia Tech.
Maybe drafted as a placeholder for another person.
True, very true. So on offense, I'll mention 2 guys. You just kind of maybe jot their names down. I do not advocate drafting either of these guys, but just coming to kind of keep on a list to check out as the season gets going here. And the first is the guy that's expected to be the starting quarterback is Davis Bryson. He has 3 years of eligibility left. He did get some playing time this past year. He only had 53 yards passing, no passing touchdowns, but on the ground he had 24 attempts for 215 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. And then the other was their leading rusher, who has 1 year of eligibility left, and that's Michael Benefield. And he had 87 attempts, 566 yards rushing for 6 touchdowns, and then 4 catches for 24 yards. And he was their leading rusher this past year. And unless you're in a super deep league, maybe you're going to use Benefield as a bye week fill-in. But at this point, that's the best you could hope for, I think, with this Kennesaw State offense. So moving on from the new kids on the block to the the champions of the league, and that is the Liberty Flames. What do we got for coaching changes for Liberty?
No coaching changes as the coaching staff looks to build off of year one and going into year two together. Year one went pretty well, but maybe this year, I haven't looked at their schedule. Maybe this year they'll actually play somebody.
I don't know. I haven't looked either. I heard watching the way too early mock draft, whoever was that drafted Caden Salter, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they made a comment about him having a super soft schedule again. So assume they must have looked at it. As far as who's leaving, they lose.
Hold up, before we get started here, moment of silence for this first loss. I was very, very excited for Reese Mooney taking over at Liberty, and he's leaving. So, quick moment of silence for me. I lost a good one. Granted, North Texas, like that opportunity just as much, but anyways.
Yeah. I remember last summer, you and I talking about Reese Mooney in the off season. I think you were in a draft, and he was someone you were looking at.
Yep.
But yeah, so Reese Mooney's gone. They also lost Jonathan Bennett, quarterback to the Citadel. Both of those guys are depth pieces. Now, this is where the impacts are. They lose wide receiver C.J. Daniels, their leading receiver to LSU. They lose wide receiver Treon Sibley out of eligibility. They lose wide receiver Noah Frith out of eligibility. Wide receiver Elijah Smoot out of eligibility. Wide receiver Aaron Bedgood out of eligibility. And tight end Bentley Hanshaw out of eligibility. They lose their top 6 pass catchers. And that's probably the biggest impacts I see based on who's leaving. Who's coming in? They do bring in quarterback Ryan Berger from App State, who was expected, or at least in the mix, to be the starter for App State last season before he got injured. So he's there to provide some depth for Caden Salter. And then they bring in wide receiver Tyson Mobley from Coastal Carolina. Running backs, they return Quentin Cooley and Billy Lucas. Von Blue also returns from injury, who many people were excited about last year, got injured early in the year. Quentin Cooley just kind of, got rolling, especially towards the end of the season. He ended up with 1,401 yards rushing on 221 attempts and 16 touchdowns. He was their leading rusher. Caden Salter, of course, also broke the 1,000-yard mark. Billy Lucas almost had 600 yards and 6 touchdowns. So that it'd be interesting. To me, it's going to be interesting to see, can Cooley repeat that again with the return of Von Blue and Lucas? Do they share that load a little bit more? Something kind of to watch out for potentially. And then the receivers, man, I don't even know. Kylan Austin is their leading receiver that returns. And he had 11 targets for 3 catches and 84 yards, no touchdowns. So, they've got to replace a lot of production from their wide receivers. They do lose their top 2 offensive linemen as well. But that receiving room is going to be something to kind of pay attention to, especially in the spring. See, is there a standout? Is there someone that's going to replace that 1,000-yard season for C.J. Daniels? Who's going to be Caden Salter's favorite target? It's definitely something that we'll be watching for this in the spring.
Yeah, because if no one pops off, kind of like in our draft, way too early draft, he was the first quarterback taken, and if there's not really somebody that steps up, I don't know if I'll be taking Salter as high in other drafts. Granted, he still gives you that rushing upside, and their schedule isn't hard. They've got App State, UMass, and like another like FCS school or something like that at a bye week in there. So it'll be pretty easy. But maybe they just ride. I mean, Von Blue was a big name, freshman name last year. I think a lot of people were excited about him. So I can see him getting a lot more run. And yeah, maybe Salter doesn't pass it as much this year. Maybe he does because he's trying to get drafted, but I think it would be some more uncertainty. And let's say somebody doesn't step up in that wide receiver room in redraft. Where would you look to take Salter in relation to other quarterbacks? Not like the round or anything, but would he still be your top 3-4 quarterbacks, or do you kind of drop in
I
that
mean, I
5 to
think
10?
I think he's got to be. I think he's got to be in that top group. I personally would not have any shares of him because I just feel like the value isn't there. Um, and multiple folks talked about it in the way too early mock draft about, hey, you know, you lose even I think maybe it was Josh that took Salter. But that like he felt like he should have took somebody else. Like seeing the quarterbacks he could have gotten in rounds, 6, 7, that the value wasn't there to take a quarterback in the first round. And that's my personal opinion as well. That's the way I feel almost every single year. But somebody's going to take Salter early. It's going to happen. He's going to go in the first round. Personally, if it's me, I'm waiting to take a quarterback. So I'm not gonna own any Salter in any redraft leagues unless he falls really, really far, which is not very likely.
Because you're holding out because you want Seth Hennigan. We know, Justice. We know.
I just think you get. I think you get. I just think the value between him and a quarterback you can get much later. There isn't. I'd rather take the later quarterback, and I'd rather take a running back or like our strategy, hit those receivers early.
So Louisiana Tech is the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs are the other team that we're going to talk about here. Coaching changes. Out is OC Jake Brown. He goes to another team that we'll talk about later. He goes to UTEP. And Scott Power out as DC. In comes Scott Parr, OC, and tight end coach. And in comes Jeremiah Johnson, who comes from University of Northern Iowa, not too far from where I live. I would say Northern Iowa, probably roughly 45 minutes to an hour away. And in 2022, he was the DC at Kent State. And then he previously was 9 seasons as UNI's or University of Northern Iowa's defensive coordinator. So it looks like he was at UNI for 9 seasons, goes to Kent State for a season, comes back to UNI, and then now is off to Louisiana Tech.
Well, with these changes, they got their work cut out for them because the offense loses a ton here for Louisiana Tech. Quarterback Hank Bachmeier is off to Wake Forest. Running back Jarvis Thornton is in the transfer portal. He has not destination has not been announced yet, so I guess technically he can still return. Running back Tyree Shelton is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Cyrus Allen is off to Texas A&M, and wide receiver Smoke Harris is out of eligibility. Additionally, they lose 6 of their offensive linemen. And that's almost half their offensive linemen. They do have 7 that return from last season. So a lot of losses on this offense. Guys that are coming in, you got running back Denario Davenport from Texas State, wide receiver Jeremiah Ballard from UTEP, and wide receiver Jamarcus Jones coming over from UAB. At quarterback, I assume the starter is going to be Jack Turner, who got some starts for them this past year. Did okay, had a 57% completion percentage, threw for 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And running back, they return freshman Keith Willis, who was their second leading rusher, 51 attempts, 288 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then at receiver, like I said, they lose their top two guys there, and Smoke Harris and Cyrus Allen. But they do bring in Jeremiah Ballard, who had 55 targets, caught 34 balls for 551 yards last season for UTEP. They also have True Edwards there, who I know some people in Campus Canton were excited about. He had 35 targets, 23 catches, 284 yards, and 2 touchdowns last year. And like I said, the offensive line, they've got a lot of replacement to do there. I just expect them to kind of take a step backwards a little bit on offense with having to replace so much between quarterback, receiver, and offensive line. But perhaps there will be a receiver or two that can step up. Smoke Harris was their leading receiver last year. He did have over 100 targets. He caught 83 balls for 796 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then Cyrus Allen was the second leading receiver, 75 targets, 46 receptions, 778 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So there could be some value there if there's a receiver like Jeremiah Ballard or a True Edwards that's going to step up and into those roles, and they get good quarterback play as well as offensive line play since they have to replace so much.
There's a lot that needs to go right. So probably not a place that I'm looking at filling any of my teams here.
Moving
on to Middle Tennessee, the Blue Raiders. I'm not gonna lie, I was really, really excited for this team coming into this year. And then once their head coach, Rick Stahl, was let go, I'm taking more of the wait and see approach to see how this offense goes. So that leads me into the coaching changes. Head coach Rick Stockstill out. Doesn't have anything lined up. Neither does his OC Mitch Stewart, and neither does his DC Scott Schaefer. So usually you see coaches get plucked right away. No jobs for these guys as of now. In comes Derek Mason, head coach. In 2023, he was an analyst for the SEC Network. In 2022, he was the defensive coordinator at Oklahoma State. In 2021, he was the DC for Auburn. And 2014 to 2021 or 2020, he was the head coach at Vandy. You're going to bring in a defensive-minded head coach, so I'm kind of interested. What are we doing at OC? OC is Brody Reeder. In 2019, he was the OC at Texas State. In 2020, he was the OC at Utah State. 2021, offensive analyst at Auburn. And then 2022 to 2023, he was the OC at UNI. Haven't watched much UNI football. FCS school. If you don't know who or UNI as a team, David Johnson, running back of the Arizona Cardinals, came out of UNI. So they got the one guy. But, Utah State, you think of that track record of what they like to do. North Texas of what they like to do. 2021, that would have been Bo Nix, right? I think. And then, not familiar with what UNI has done this year, but I would assume he's coming in there to throw the ball. Defensive coordinator that Derek Mason is bringing in with him, Brian Stewart, DC in 2023 with the Houston Roughnecks, the XFL. First XFL coach I've seen coming into the college ranks, at least doing this. And in 2021, he was the DC at Maryland. So who's coming? Who's leaving?
All right. So they lose running back Frank Peasant. He's in the portal. No destination has been mentioned yet. They lose wide receiver Elijah Metcalf to Marshall, wide receiver Justin Olson to Charlotte. I'm not going to go through all the receivers, but they lose a lot. They lose 6 of their top 7 pass catchers. The only one that's still there is wide receiver / tight end Holden Willis, who happened to be their leading receivers last year. They also lose 5 of their top 7 offensive linemen. So, pass catchers and line is also going to be an issue for Middle Tennessee State. They'll need people to step up. Who's coming in? They bring in running back Brian Bruton from Connecticut, wide receiver Omari Kelly from Auburn, and wide receiver Jamarian Carter from Vanderbilt. Returning for them at quarterback is Nicholas Vattiato, who's someone that I kind of liked last year, have a few shares of going in, but I don't know that I'm going to be actively pursuing him where I don't already own him.
Tough with a line.
Well, you're
line uncertainty.
losing all the line, losing all the receivers, new coaches. I think people might look at his stats last year, and he might go a little bit higher. He had 3,087 yards passing, 23 passing touchdowns, 402 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns. Statistic wise, he's going to look good. So he might go a little bit higher in drafts than I would possibly be willing to take him. Running back, they do return Jaden Krettel, who was their leading rusher last year with 427 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like I said, receiver is a mess other than Holden Willis. And it'll be interesting to see if Holden Willis maintains his tight end eligibility, because I got to expect, Derek Mason is going to be more traditional with his tight ends. Whereas I think Holden Willis is really a receiver that, that they may have labeled a tight end at Middle Tennessee. I don't think he's really a tight end. He doesn't have that size. So I almost wonder. I just exercise caution that, will Holden Willis what will he be on their official roster, and will Fantrax follow suit if he is a receiver? Will they make him a receiver on Fantrax as well? So just a word of caution, because Holden Willis is probably, I think he was the number 2 or 3 tight end in our draft. Number 3, right? Was it Fannin and Dalvin Smith went first, 1 and 2, and then Willis was 3.
And maybe RJ Maryland was 4, something like that.
We're not talking about Western Kentucky yet, but Dalvin Smith's another one. But yeah, I just just a word of caution. If you're taking Willis so early, there's a chance that he could not be a tight end anymore in Fantrax. So just be, I don't know. For me, it's going to be an avoid for him, for Holden Willis.
I think I'm taking, if I am drafting and my draft to start, no matter when it is, if at that point Holden Willis is labeled a tight end, I would feel comfortable taking him with the expectation that I will lose the eligibility. So it's kind of like, you've got your ice cream and you got the cherry on top. Hey, I might, and you're not going to take them early. I think you're going to have to take them later to feel comfortable with that. It's like, all right, yeah, I lost the eligibility. That's okay. As opposed to like, oh, I'm going to go get this cheat code guy, and then you lose the eligibility, and the only reason you grabbed him was for the cheat code.
Well, the one thing that is good is by the time most folks draft, like the spring roster will be out, and you'll be able to see what does the official roster call him. Official roster calls him a tight end, then you could feel really safe about the pick, right? If the official roster says he's a receiver, then you got to kind of weigh that in when you're selecting him. Next up is the New Mexico State Aggies.
Coaching changes. We have out head coach Jerry Kill goes to Vandy to be a consultant. I don't really know what you do as a consultant, but that seems like a job I might be interested in. Just consult. I also don't know what you can consult Vandy in, because I know this is a G5 podcast, but Vandy does a very good job of identifying athletes and under the radar guys, developing them. So I want to learn more about a consultant.
Well, Jerry Kill has beaten Auburn the last 2 times he played them, so maybe he can get Vanderbilt to a win over Auburn.
Yeah. And then we've got OC Tim Beck. He's out. He goes to be the OC at Vandy. And DC Nate Drilling. He goes to become the Utah State defensive coordinator. Also, Melvin Rice was a co-DC there. He goes to be the safeties coach at Vandy. So you can see a lot of Vandy here in the New Mexico State Aggies. In comes head coach Tony Sanchez. He was previously the wide receiver coach for the last 2 years, and has head coaching experience from the UNLV staff 2015 to 2019. OC Ghali Muhammad Langford, previously the running back coach in 2022 and 2023. Illinois State in 2020 and 2021, he was the OC. And in 2019, he was a wide receiver coach. And that would have been at Illinois State. So Illinois State, wide receiver coach, then co-OC for 2 years. Then he becomes the running back coach there at New Mexico State. DC comes in, Joe Morris. He was previously the DC and the defensive end coach for Sam Houston for the last 3 years. So that is his background. Justice, who do we have that's leaving and who's coming in?
I feel like this is a recurring theme for most of these teams in Conference USA, but I think New Mexico State's going to be another avoid for me in fantasy drafts. So they're losing do everything quarterback Diego Pavia off to Vanderbilt. They lose quarterback Gavin Frakes to Virginia. They lose backup quarterback Blaze Berlowitz to Vanderbilt.
Oh, Vanderbilt.
They lose wide receiver Jonathan Brady to California. Tight end Thomas Whitford is out of eligibility. And the only quarterback left on the roster and he wasn't a quarterback last year. They moved him to tight end, I think, just to get him on the field. That's former Texas A&M Aggie Eli Stowers. He is the only quarterback currently on the roster from last season. In the portal, they did get quarterback Deuce Hogan from Kentucky. Running back, they return their second leading rusher behind Diego Pavia, and that was Star Thomas, who had 653 yards on 112 attempts and 4 touchdowns, and Amonte Watkins, who had 572 yards on 59 attempts for 2 touchdowns. Receivers, their leading receiver, Jonathan Brady, is gone. Their second leading receiver, Trent Hudson, returns. He had 57 targets, 34 catches, 545 yards. He did have 10 touchdowns last year. Offensive line, good news. They return everybody but one. So, good news there from offensive line standpoint. But, Diego Pavia was really the only one that, I think folks would have rostered. And he's gone. So, this is another avoid for me for fantasy purposes.
Just on the surface, if I am looking for something, I need to have something from this team on my fantasy team. Look no further than the running back. You've got the running back coach, goes to become the OC. You've got a line that is coming back. That's pretty well, and your running back's coming back. So if you have to take somebody, I'm looking running back here. Yeah, pretty much an avoid for me this year. The other thing that you mentioned, hey, there's not a lot of fancy options in this conference. It seems going through this also seems like coach poaching, like within conference. Like, all right, I'm gonna go be a DC over here, from over here, OC over here. Kind of interesting going through these teams.
All right. Next up, another newcomer to the conference this past season, and that was the Sam Houston Bearcats.
Coaching changes? None. We're going to get quite the team coming back. I think they won one game last year. The last team to get a win in the FBS. So, maybe Sam Houston messes around, gets like 2 or 3 wins this year. We'll see.
Who's leaving? They lose their quarterback, Keegan Shoemaker, who's out of eligibility, Grant Gunnell out of eligibility, and wide receiver Alvante Woodard out of eligibility. So you say, well, they need a quarterback. Well, they bring one in. Quarterback Jace Bauer from Central Michigan coming over to Sam Houston. They also bring in tight end Austin Smith from Memphis, tight end Fernando Garza from Texas A&M, and then someone I want to mention who isn't a newcomer, but who returns from injury. He was their leading receiver in 2021. He redshirted in 2022, got injured in 2023, and that's Ife Adeye. So, they addressed their biggest need, which is quarterback, with Jace Bauer. They return running back John Gentry, who was their leading rusher last season with 394 yards, 3 touchdowns on 119 attempts. And probably the biggest one is they return Noah Smith at receiver. Their leading receiver, 101 targets, 79 receptions, 782 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He was, especially towards the end of the year, he was a PPR monster, man. And so, hopefully he can kind of get that connection going with Jace Bauer. Offensive line, they pretty much return everyone that matters. So yeah, I mean, I think this is an offense where you're gonna, probably go after Jace Bauer and Noah Smith.
And pour one out for Grant, just never materialized over at, what was it, Arizona to Memphis to North Texas to
Sam Houston. He's a Texas high school legend there, right? I mean, didn't he own a lot of high school records?
Yep.
Passing records in the state of Texas. So, yeah, he's no one has to worry about drafting Grant Gunnell anymore. He's done. All right, so that takes us over to the UTEP Miners.
Well, a new team in the CUSA, or that we're talking about, new team. Same story. All the coaches out. So, out head coach Dana Dimel, OC Scotty O'Hara, DC Bradley Dale Pavito, all out. In, Scotty Walden, head coach, joins the Miner after 4 seasons as the head coach of Austin Peay State University. Shocking. DC JJ Clark joins his staff from Austin Peay. He was coaching, he was coached linebackers and spent 3 seasons as a defensive coordinator at the NAIA level. He was promoted to become the DC and the safeties coach in 2023. So he will assume the DC position there. And then, like we spoke earlier, Jake Brown is their offensive coordinator. Brown was the co-offensive coordinator at Louisiana Tech the last 2 years. Previously worked at Texas Tech, Baylor, and TCU prior to Louisiana Tech. Aaron Foster, the cornerbacks coach and passing game coordinator at Austin Peay, now safeties coach and passing game coordinator at UTEP. I did want to put passing game coordinator in there with Aaron Foster because, yes, Jake Brown was the OC at Louisiana Tech, but he was the co-OC there. So really not sure play calling wise. So I kind of wanted to attack this from both in case Jake Brown doesn't do the play calling and maybe Aaron Foster's has some influence on this, but yeah, passing game coordinator at Austin P. So Austin P coach gets hired, brings in a lot of his staff. Shocker.
He brings in more than a lot of staff. He brings in a lot of players too. So who's leaving? Quarterback Gavin Hardison out of eligibility. Running back Torrance Burgess Jr. is off to Texas State. Running back Deion Hankins is over to
Texas State.
Texas State as well.
That just happened here the last couple days.
Yeah.
Maybe yesterday.
Wide receiver Jeremiah Ballard, who we talked about earlier, is over to Louisiana Tech. Wide receiver Tyron Smith over to Cincinnati. Wide receiver Kelly Akarare over to Mississippi State. They lose their top 4 pass catchers, lose their top 5 offensive linemen. Who's coming in? And almost every single one of these players is from Austin P. Quarterback Skylar Locklear from Austin P. Running back Calvin Hill from Texas State. Running back Javon Jackson from Austin P. Running back Marquez Taylor from Austin P. Wide receiver Cam Thomas from Austin P. Wide receiver Trey Goodman from Austin P. Wide receiver Kenny Odom from Austin P. And wide receiver Ashton Nickelberry from Austin P. I guess if I was going to highlight, they do return Cade McConnell at quarterback, who did start some games for him last year. If I was to highlight one of these Austin P guys that that does have my interest, and that is running back Javon Jackson, freshman last year at Austin P. Ran the ball 239 times for 1,339 yards and 9 touchdowns. We'll see if that can translate to the FBS, but I gotta believe that he's gonna he's gonna be their man. He's gonna get their shot to kind of lead this UTEP rushing attack. That's probably the one guy that kind of has my interest from a fantasy perspective right now for UTEP. And then kind of take a wait and see approach there on quarterback and receiver.
I was going to try to look up a couple of these guys' stats. Do you have any of those available, or
other than Javon Jackson? No, I don't. Javon Jackson's the only one I had readily available.
So Cam Thomas, 50 receptions for 629 yards, 5 touchdowns. He was third on the team in receiving. Let's see here. Who else do we got? That was Cam.
What about quarterback Skylar Locklear? Was he their starter last year?
No, that looks like it was Mike DeLeo. Locklear got in 2 games. He was 3 for 4.
What did so just looking at their stats, it looks like more like a running team than a passing team?
I have to click on. Let's see here. Give me a quick second. I have to click on. So points per game, 34.08 points per game. Rushing wise, I mean, they throw the ball a fair amount. Let's see here. So they averaged 274 passing and 152 on the ground. So more of a passing team than a rushing team. 18 touchdowns on the ground, 30 in the air. So I'm going to go with more passing. And I would assume, given Skylar Locklear's move over, he's probably the shoe-in to start, would be my guess, knowing the playbook and whatnot being that.
Definitely, he has a leg up at least, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that brings us to our final team of the evening, the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers.
Coaching changes, not so much a change, but an addition. Here, just within the last week, Will Friend, OC and O-line coach, comes in Again, not crazy about OC and O line. I'm trying to think of who their OC was this last year.
It was
This younger
Hollingshead.
guy.
Wasn't
Yeah,
it Drew Hollingshead who came over? He was a wide receiver coach
at Mississippi
under
State.
and was at Mississippi State under Mike Leach in
Mike
the run and
Leach.
shoot.
Yep. So again, another Mississippi State guy comes over who is under Mike Leach, but he was the O line coach at Mississippi State. So I'm trying to like piece together what Western Michigan is, or not Western Michigan, Western Kentucky is trying to do here, because we talked about it last year. There was something off. I really don't think Austin Reed changed a lot, from the previous year where he was a top quarterback for a fantasy perspective to last year where he was average, up and down, especially here in conference play. And you had Corley, like you had guys. Well, now you lose Corley. Sorry to burst your bubble with who's leaving, but you don't have wide receivers that I think can really take this team to the next level. And you got a new quarterback. I just don't know what adding a co OC. I guess I haven't seen that it's co OC, but they're both listed as OCs, so I'm just gonna assume. I just don't know what an O line, OC, and him are going to do together, and I'm wondering if they're gonna maybe shift to a run approach, which would be kind of gross, I guess, from a Western Kentucky, like of what you expect,
Yeah.
and especially, being under a Mike Leach kind of coach team where you're throwing the ball a lot. So it wouldn't make sense, but I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of an O line coach and everything.
I think their players are going to get overdrafted, right? Because of Austin Reed and Corley. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe that won't happen, but that's what I think will happen. As far as who's leaving, you already covered on the two biggest ones. Austin Reed and Malachi Corley are both off to pursue the NFL. Quarterback Bronson Barron is off to Southern Utah. Wide receiver Blue Smith is in the portal. No destination yet. The same with wide receiver Jimmy Holiday. Running back Marquise Stepp is out of eligibility. And they also lose a lot of their offensive line starters that were in the portal. Who's coming in? Quarterback TJ Finley from Texas State is coming in. Running back Teron Keith from Bowling Green. And wide receiver Kassan Johnson from Alabama State in the FCS are the guys coming in. Finley, I'm assuming, is going to compete with Caden Veltkamp. Veltkamp was leaving because Western Kentucky told him they wanted him to be a tight end. And he's like, "No, I want to play quarterback." Going into the portal, and they ended up starting Turner Hilton in the bowl game. Turner Hilton looked terrible. Veltkamp came in and just slung the ball all around, led them to from a 28-point deficit to victory. I got to see it up close in person. I think he threw for like almost 400 yards. So I think Veltkamp said, "Hey, I can play quarterback, boys." He removed his name from the portal return, so I got to assume that, hey, after that performance, they said, "Hey, you should stay around and play quarterback for us." But I got to assume it's between him and TJ Finley for that starting job.
I would agree. Also, the whole TJ Finley thing has got my head kind of trying to figure out what's going on, because obviously did great things there at Texas State. Then you bring in Jaden Delora. All right, I'm out. Kind of sounded like he was on the fence to begin with if he was coming back. Bring him in kind of makes my decision. Well, I do want to play football, but I want to leave now. And then, the whole Jaden Delora stuff continues to unfold at Texas State. Now, Texas State, he he unenrolls at Texas State, which then I'm wondering if he wouldn't have come in there. Does TJ Finley leave? Does he not? Now he goes over here, Veldecamp. Hey, they want to make you a tight end. You got a spot start. You did really well. Are they moving you to tight end? Probably not, because you removed your name from the portal. But then here comes TJ Finley. Like, I don't know. There's a lot of weird stuff kind of going on here that definitely excited to see how the spring practices go. But I fully anticipate split reps. We don't want to lose either quarterback. We're going to make you both think you can compete for this. And that would be my guess.
Running back, Elijah Young returns, who was their leading rusher with 490 yards this past season. As I mentioned, they brought in Teron Keith over from Bowling Green. Receiving, they returned Dalvin Smith, who is another one that I'm kind of expecting to lose his tight end eligibility. This past season, he had 0 inline snaps, whereas at least the previous 2 years, he had some. This year, he had none. But he does return. Last year, he was their second leading receiver, 50 catches for 513 yards and 6 touchdowns. He went absolutely bonkers in the bowl game. He's a size mismatch for most corners. He's a very tall guy. So he does create some mismatch with his size. Could be a great red zone target for Western Kentucky. Another receiver that actually got drafted in our way too early mock draft, in my opinion, got drafted too high for my personal taste, but that was freshman Easton Messer, who was their third leading receiver last year, had 42 receptions, 484 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And like I said, they lose it's like 3 of their starting offensive linemen to transfer. So they got a little bit of work to do there as well. For me, it's going to be an avoid, just because I feel like we were, in my opinion, we've already seen it, especially with Easton Messer. These guys are going to get overdrafted. And then Dalvin Smith, he loses that tight end eligibility. He's not as enticing, as a receiver. Still definitely, draft worthy, but not as enticing if he's not a tight end.
So, synopsis, Conference USA, pretty much an avoid for fantasy purposes. Not a lot going on here.
Yeah, at least this early in the off season, it does not look like a ton of great options available in Conference USA.
So that's going to do it for us tonight. Next week, we will be going full bore with that sweet nectar on the G5, and we will be diving into the transfer portal. And our next conference up will be the Mid-American Conference, the MAC. The MACtion. Is the MAC back? Kind of got disappointed the last 2 years, I feel like it's been for the MACtion. So we'll see what we've got going on in that conference next week. As always, thank you for your support. Please like, subscribe, retweet, leave a 5-star review, all those things above. We are available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, at least till April 2nd or so. Anywhere where you listen to your podcasts, we are there. Again, appreciate Jared for letting us be a part of the Way Too Early mock draft. Appreciate everybody who watches, retweets. If you've got any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to @justice_2318 or myself @ProbascoLuke or at our G5 Hive account @G5Hive. Again, we are doing this because we thought it's interesting. It's nice to know going into the spring. Obviously, there'll be a slew of transfers after the spring practice. But knowing where these coaches are coming and going from is important to know, I think, pre-spring and being aware of what maybe they might do offensively. But yeah, this is stuff that we think you guys want. Make sure you let us know what you want to hear, because ultimately you are our consumer. We want to, we want to do what's best for you guys. So if you guys have any ideas, anything like that, just let us know. Justice, you got anything else?
No, we'll see you next Monday for the Mac.
All right. Good night.
Hot dog, hot dog, hot dog,